Good to go.
Okay, and I hit continue.
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello there. On behalf of the National Institute of Mental Health, I just want to congratulate all the IRI fellows for getting as far as you've gotten so far. This is an amazing. I'd like to extend my welcome to you. I wish I was there in person with you. So you all have worked hard to get to this point, to be an IRI fellow, and this is quite a distinction. So congratulations to you. And a lot of us are looking forward to seeing your impact on the field. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and kind of tell you a little bit about what we would normally do is each year we get together in St. Louis. And we get a chance to meet and chat over lunch, and I get to hear about all your projects. But unfortunately, it's a different year. We're on an unprecedented public health pandemic, and we are looking to you to help us provide some research to address the COVID-19 as well as the impact of COVID-19 on mental health among individuals across the country, as well as other facets of mental health that's needed for implementation of evidence-based practices. The wonderful thing is, as you work through your IRI curriculum with these fantastic faculty, and there's other folks, of course, that are going to be involved in your research training, you just get to have access to the best brains in implementation science. So you're really lucky. And I know in the future you're going to be giving back to the field. So we're really looking forward to seeing that. What I would like to do in the next 20 or so minutes, maybe 30 minutes, is go over D&I research at NIH broadly, and then shift kind of go into NIMH, the Mission and Strategic Plan. We got a new strategic plan recently. Tell you a little bit about D&I research at our institute at NIMH and kind of go through a number of the different arenas there. And then at the end, kind of underscore the importance of being brave and persistent. So that's kind of what I'd like to cover in the next few minutes. So at NIH-wide, some of you may not know that there are 27 institutes and centers across NIH. We're within the Department of Health and Human Services. Francis Collins is our director, and we are just so impressed with him. He's been our director, boy, for about 12 years. 11 years, and he's just outstanding. And of course, you've seen him more recently with Tony Fauci, and they're directing the COVID effort, thank goodness. So we're very, very fortunate that we are with the NIH and taking a lead in public health. And that's the mission of NIH, is to improve the public health of the nation. So we are there. The NIMH is one of the 27 institutes and centers, and we work closely with NIDA. You'll hopefully get a chance to meet Tisha Wiley and Laurie Ducharme and Belinda Sims and a number of folks that are involved in D&I research across our sister institute. So the other thing I wanted to point out is down at the bottom of the screen is the Center for Scientific Review. When you submit an application, that's where the application typically goes, and they farm it out to all the different institutes if it goes there, or they will do a review internally, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So at NIH, there is a D&I funding announcement that started about almost 15 years ago, and there's been 5 reissuances. So the first one, so I'm just showing you this. We're not going to go into each one, but each one had a different focus. And as you can see, over the next 3 years during the second reissuing, the focus changed and over that. So right now we're in the 5th reissuance. Just last year. And the gist of this most recent D&I funding announcement is to focus on integration, scale up, and sustainability of evidence-based interventions, including de-implementation. A lot of folks are unhooking, I call it unhooking, they're unhooking their their practices that are proven to not work, or they're even iatrogenic. So when they take a practice out that folks have been utilizing for many years, how do they undo that and then put an evidence-based practice in its place? So these are the kinds of scientific approaches that we're intrigued about and would like to get more research in that area. So the DIRH study section, Dissemination and Implementation Research in Health, they are through CSR, what I was mentioning, the Center for Scientific Review. They oversee that special study section that was just designed for D&I research. And that took a while to get. And David Chambers, who used to work at NIMH, he's now at NCI. He's been an incredible leader. And he was the one that started getting the D&I FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement, up and running. And he helped get CSR to have this special studies section. So if you submit an application to one of those funding announcements that I just showed you, the D&I funding announcement, they will be reviewing it, and this is the one research question that they will be asking: how will this study advance the field of implementation science? So think of that as you write your application. This is how this set of reviewers will be looking at your application. So that's kind of the NIH overview. I'd like to kind of shift gears. Oh, excuse me, we've got one more for NIH. It's going to be the overall money. When you think about, I can say, oh yeah, we're really committed. We love D&I research, but the proof is in the money. So as you can see, this is a three-year-old timeline here of an NHLBI study did this, a review. But you can see NIMH is one of the leaders. Now 3 years have gone by, I'm guessing NCI has surpassed us. But we're one of the top D&I research funders, and this is just the R01s, not counting the R34s, the R21s, and all the other pieces. But we are the top funders at NIH as well as NCI. I'm sure NHLBI, which is the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, they've bumped their way up. NIAID, that's Tony Fauci's group, they probably bumped their research up, of course, and NIDA. NIDA has also bumped their, so the gist of showing you this pie chart is to see there is a commitment to D&I research across the institutes. And I was just saying, NIMH is big on D&I research, and our general goal is to bring the science of research to bear on finding ways to prevent, cure, and treat mental health, and mental illness across all different ages and stages of life. So that's our general mission. We just completed a strategic plan, and I have to be candid here. I know the thought of a strategic plan makes people's eyes glaze over. It does me, but it's important for you in a couple of ways. The main way is that when you write your application, you're going to say this application is responsive to strategic plan and objective like 4.2, and that way you're going to be underscoring how that is. But it gives you a roadmap and a blueprint for how our institute is envisioning, where we're going to go, and this helps you frame your science. And as you develop your research questions, the strategic plan is really a helpful guide. So there's been differences a little bit compared to the one that we had before. Genetics, we've learned more about genetics, we've learned more about antidepressant meds with translational science. And in services research, we're finding new approaches such as navigator models, coordinated specialty care, and other arenas to implement evidence-based practices in a more rapid way. So this is the prior strategic plan that you see here, strategy 4.2 that folks put down. Here's the difference. The new version, it's a little bit different. You'll see it's to expedite adoption, sustained implementation, and please don't panic because dissemination has dropped, is not in this. It's embedded in the text of other within strategic 4.20. So this is, just shifting some of the text generally. And then if you want to really get in the weeds, there's different objectives within strategy 4.2A, again, strengthening partnerships. 4.2B is building models to scale up evidence-based practices, and 4.2C is looking, kind of using new tools decision support technologies to help us. And now it's going to be digital technology with COVID. So I'm trying to identify new approaches. So that just gives you, the lay of the land with the strategic plan. Our NIMH director is Joshua Gordon. He came aboard about 3 years ago, maybe 4, and his framework for what he wants to see researchers, address in their applications is he likes rigorous, meritorious studies. He wants things to be, innovative, have a high impact, and, he wants to know a little bit about what unique attributes you have do you bring to the field. So these are the set of principles that he carries about the science that he thinks he would support us funding. So something for you to think about. So key themes of currently active NIMH research grants that have come through. This is, NIMH research that have come through that special study section, the DIRH study section. Now, this is last year's data. I'm sorry, I have been swamped with work and I haven't had a chance to update this, but I think it's still, it's just a touch off. We may have 22 active grants instead of 19 instead of 20, but I wanted to include this so you have a sense of what we're generally funding at NIMH. So a year ago, we had 20 active grants that we funded that came through that special study section, the DIRH study section. And if you go in NIH Reporter, you can do an analysis of all this. So what I have here is this kind of little thematic wheel that you can do yourself. And you'll find that, at the time a year ago, there were 20 active D&I grants that NIMH funded. And these were the 6 themes that came up, and pragmatic measures is one of them. And then new grants that were funded, these were the themes: diffusion, quality, health benefits, prevention. So if you dug down a little deeper into the themes of the active grants, for instance, you go in the pragmatic measures one, you can see, who are the folks that we're funding? You'll see, I believe we've got Greg Aaron's development and testing of an evidence-based intervention and sustainment measure. We have a couple of Kara Lewis's R01s in here. So, you get to kind of dig down and see what are the actual research projects that are currently being funded. So of the DIRH applications that were reviewed within that special study section, about 2/3 are R01s, a third are R21s. So the R01s are the 5-year that we call it the big kahuna. It's the gold standard where you get up to $2.5 million. So those are the large studies. The R21s are 2-year studies focusing more on innovation, trying to do something that is kind of a proof of concept. And then the R03 is usually data collection. I think that might be Greg Aaron's study, but those are secondary data analysis typically. So there's the 20 that we kind of talked about last slide. So of those projects, we've got 1 new investigator in there. And as of a year ago, I wish I updated this, but I'm sure it'll be higher now. But back then, there were 56 publications from those R01s, and then 10 publications from the R21, and I'm sure Greg has published off of the R03. But just gives you a snapshot of what we're looking for at NIMH. Is we do want to find publications coming through the IRI, the D&I pipeline. So that's really exciting. The other really important piece I want to share with you is that the DIRH pathway is not the only one at NIMH. Now, D&I research is embedded through so many other funding mechanisms and other reviews. So there are many more that are coming through. So that's something I just want to underscore as we kind of go through the rest of this presentation. While there were 20 with the DIRH study section, as of last year, there were 31 D&I research projects that were reviewed by our NIMH or study sections. So this is really exciting. There are many pathways for you to apply and do D&I research that so that it's not, you don't feel like you just have to go to one funding announcement. So, and as you can see, there's a wonderful array of different type of mechanisms. We have about less than half are R01s. We have R34s, which were in the green, 13%, and then a number of different other mechanisms. So who's the 19%? The our K awards, which are career development awards, a lot of D&I research in there. So there's lots of ways to apply for D&I research funding. So I just hope that's the message you hear. So generally, one of the themes that we have a lot of hybrid designs coming through, and those were the 31 studies that I just kind of back here. Those are all hybrid studies. And again, here's the thematic, wheel that comes from them. We have a number of them involved with suicide prevention, disruptive behavior, behavior change, depression, and then a number of studies are not doing D&I research, but they're planning to in the future do a hybrid design. So this is exciting. It shows there's a pipeline of D&I research being developed. The other, what I call portals, the other ways to get funding of D&I research at NIMH are the clinical trials funding announcements, the K awards. We have something called the Alacrity Centers, and that's more for advanced researchers. It's called the P50, so it's really involved and complicated, but the Alacrity Centers are the advanced laboratories for accelerating research and impact of treatments for youth and adults with mental illness. So we have, I believe, about 8 or 10 funded already, and we're probably going to fund a handful more, and then see those go over a cycle or two. And then there's other funding opportunity announcements. There's HEAL, the opioid opportunities for funding across NIH, and the Practice-Based Research Network, and other, EpiNet. So there's just lots of options. So hopefully that you're hearing that throughout this presentation. At NIMH, we are big on clinical trials and big on clinical research and huge on what we call the experimental therapeutics approach. About a decade ago, the IOM report, there was an IOM report that stated there's such a slow pace of completing NIH trials and hardly any innovation, and that there was a limited understanding about targets and mechanisms. So NIMH about 6 years ago embraced this and began requiring researchers to identify targets, mechanisms of change. Now, some folks have been having trouble. It's easy to do in basic science or translational science, where you're identifying a molecule and you're trying to perhaps, if you're developing a medication, you're trying to manipulate cellular biology, so the mechanism would be easy. Here's what you're manipulating. It's tougher to do on the applied end of research, where you're manipulating behaviors and attitudes or skills, but it's doable. And that's what we're really inviting you, what we're requiring you to do. So you would be identifying various, it's kind of thinking of it as a mediator. What is it that you're manipulating in this clinical trial? What is the magic piece that one group gets in your intervention, or your implementation strategy, that the other group doesn't? So articulating that, and then how are you planning to measure it? What instruments are you using to measure pre and post? And then how are that mechanism, if you're enhancing competency of a skill, how are you measuring it, and how does that relate to the proximal outcome, which is going to be your implementation outcome, and the distal outcome, which will be a clinical outcome? So these are the things for you to think about. And we can go over this when we talk later on, I think next week. So this is, folks have been, who are experienced researchers getting funding at NIH, have been living with this for 6 years. Your faculty are aware of it. So it takes a little while to get, but once you get it, you can, okay, I can work with this. So We have a number of DNI studies that are that have been funded through the clinical trials funding opportunity announcements that are doing hybrids. So you've got a couple folks doing hybrid 1, a couple doing hybrid 2. Mary McKay, who is your dean, the dean at the School of Social Work at WashU. This is, I believe, might be finishing right up here. And then Laura Brookman-Frazee and Abin Stammer, IRI graduates, by the way. They are doing a very complicated and huge hybrid 3 with autism. So there's lots of folks doing some fantastic studies. So we've already talked about this. This is the funding opportunity for DNI researchers through the NIH, the DI, we call the DIRH funding opportunity announcement. This is what I was just talking with you about, the NIMH clinical trials funding announcements. And it's going to look, you're going to have an R34, and that's a 3-year funding announcement. It provides you the opportunity to do a pilot. Whereas the RO1 is typically a 4, and if you can justify it, if you need a 5th year, we can go with that. And then the collaborative RO1 is when you have one or more, well, you have 2 or more researchers coming in together to do a collaborative piece. And there's lots of reasons why they might come in together. One of the things you'll notice in the titles of these RFAs is the word to test the effectiveness. And that's why it sets up the opportunity to invite hybrid designs testing the effectiveness and implementation. So that's why we have so many hybrids coming through these funding announcements. You go on our website, you'll get to this web page, and then you'll see over here on kind of the right side of the page, that's where those clinical funding announcements are. So that'll give you a visual to look for. There are so many others. In fact, as I mentioned before, DNI research is embedded throughout our portfolios and our funding announcements. And here's just a handful of a couple. These are through our division of services and intervention research. So you have, if you're interested in juvenile justice, we have that, and that's Denise Giuliano-Bilt. She's my colleague. She oversees that one. We have effectiveness trials for post-acute interventions and services. And then there's an R34 companion. Typically, there's an R01 and R34 companion. We have family navigators. We've got the R34 and R01. That's the one that I wrote. And then we have the alacrity centers. But there's many others. But these were just to give you an example. And these are still active, and a number of these will be reissued, by the way. So just so you know. So now let's talk about future directions. Overall, this is kind of a simple snapshot of here's the themes of research that we're interested in: sustainment, hybrid studies, improving methods and measures, adaptive designs. Most designs are very interesting to us. De-implementation. So that's just kind of a little laundry list. But I'd like to kind of go into this a little bit more because recently, your IRI leaders, Enola and John, along with Sonia Schoenfeld, were involved with doing a special issue in the Administration and Policy in Mental Health journal. And they invited some IRI graduates to submit some papers, and they talked about the history of IRI, all the fantastic accomplishments that have been completed by a number of the IRI graduates, and what they would like to see in the future. And I was very lucky and fortunate that they invited me to provide a commentary on some of the, on the articles that were the companion pieces, and try to tie them to NIMH studies. And the thing is, I worked on this incredible table that kind of tied the themes that were from the public, I think there were 7 articles, and then connected them to core implementation science principles for future research. I wasn't, because it was a commentary, I wasn't allowed to say these are the NIMH priorities, but they align well with NIMH priorities. So in the commentary, the article, the beauty of the table didn't come through. They changed the formatting, but this I thought this was a nice, easy way to follow. And you can see there's different phases: pre-implementation, implementation, and post-implementation. We'll just kind of briefly go over each one because it ties into future directions of NIH. So when we talk about the pre-implementation phase, and again, these were some of the themes that were identified in the articles from IRI graduates. But the gist is, we want you to know that NIMH is very eager in enhancing stakeholder engagement, testing new strategies like participatory designs, building transdisciplinary research teams through the use of social network approaches, and non-traditional team members. The Alacrity Center is a key example of that. And then organizational readiness is really important to try to assess the readiness and alignment so that the organizations are ready to implement a study, with fidelity. So these are the kinds of areas, and they align well with our strategic plan, by the way. So there's some potential future directions that NIMH are interested in the pre-implementation phase. In the implementation phase, we are interested in hybrid designs, hybrid 1s, 2s, and 3s. We are very interested in randomized clinical trials to test new methods to manipulate implementation outcomes, utilization of system science, agent-based modeling, rapid cycle approaches, with making sure that the NIMH experimental therapeutics approach is embedded in that. Very interested in utilizing mixed methods. Again, human-centered designs, RAPIS is something that I know Larry Palinkas is utilizing. And then promoting measurement development, that's always a key piece. We really need to enhance the ability of designing and testing psychometric properties of measures. So these are important areas in the implementation phase. And then the post-implementation or sustainment phase, these are areas that we're interested in. The 3 are developing and testing learning systems of care, new approaches, because systemically, there's lots of different activities going on various levels. So whether there's organization, system, the external and internal influences, using CFR or EPIS to try to frame those. So these are important. We're really interested in system level factors. Identifying organizational phenotypes that promote implementation and sustainment. To me, I think it's one of the most fascinating things is, can you identify organizational characteristics or attributes that serve as a diagnostic determinant that promotes organizational scale-up? So these are things that we will be very intrigued by. And then the last one I want to kind of go over is conducting practice-based research to improve sustainability. So these are testing implementation and deployment-focused strategies that encourage adoption, quality, scale-up, and sustainability across. I mean, these are kind of, what is it policy-wise, practice-wise, what can you embed within an organizational climate so that these practices, evidence-based practices, are are accepted and utilized on a regular basis. So that kind of captures the overview of our future directions. Other important information to consider. Some of you might be asking, should I apply to the DIRH or NIMH review study section? We get that all the time. Which study section should I apply for? The answer is it depends. It just does. Do you want to focus? Some folks just look for the key under the light. That's the DIRH FOAs. Well, this has implementation science in the title. Whereas the keys are actually, many more keys are over in the clinical trials, FOAs, all the PAs, program analysis we have, many of the RFAs, implementation science is in there too. So, you have to think about what research question you have And then you need to think about, well, which study section will be more receptive to my research question. Uh, if you're interested in promoting implementation science per se, the DIRH may be the way to go. But if you have a mental health component that, remember, the folks in DIRH are implementation researchers, but they could be cardiologists, they could be, cancer researchers. They don't know mental health. So if you have some nuances in your study that really underscore mental health, you might want to go to the NIMH SERV study section. We have implementation scientists on our study section as well. So, that's kind of one of these things you have to think about when you submit that. So that's one of the pieces to consider. Other areas or mistakes that I see is that some folks are writing an application because it advances the field of implementation science, which is really important, and that's what the DIRH study section is looking for. NIMH, if you want funding from us, you've got to have mental health front and foremost. You can't bury it. So unfortunately, we've had some folks with some really good scores, but because it was just about developing a tool or developing an implementation science question, mental health was buried in there, and I couldn't get it funded. We were able to get them to resubmit and change the title, but make sure you have mental health in the title, or if it's TINIDA, drug abuse, substance abuse, remember your funder. Just keep that in mind. At NIMH, please articulate your targets and mechanisms of change. This is critical. Otherwise, it won't get funded. And then lastly, NIMH requires D&I researchers to measure clinical outcomes. So when you submit to NIMH, your proximal outcomes are your implementation outcomes of fidelity, acceptability, appropriateness, et cetera. But your distal outcomes are your clinical outcomes, and you must include that. And it could be collecting data from an EHR on just general symptoms or functioning of kids or adults. But we need to know, you may implement a beautifully designed implementation strategy, but we need to know what direction those clinical outcomes go. What if it's a beautiful study, but the folks get worse? We just need to know that. So it's something for you to consider. So next steps, after all that information I provided, I just want you, as you go through your IRI training, we want you to get on our listserv and be plugged into our NIMH announcements, priorities, and activities. This year we would have had our Mental Health Services Research Conference. It would have been August 3rd and 4th, but because of COVID, we're postponing it for hopefully just 1 year. But that would have been an opportunity. You would have met a lot of, it's free. We would encourage you to find a way to come, and you could have met a lot of folks to network with and learn more about what other studies were funding. So please, get on our listserv, attend some of our events, especially when there's a vaccine and things get back to normal. Second, please contact program staff early. We are here. That's our job. And now we're very busy lately. It's just been crazy with the COVID. There's many new activities and areas that we've been taxed to work on. But be persistent. Just be respectful and kind to us, but be persistent. The other piece I want to ensure that you hear is be brave. It's tough to submit an application, especially if you get a school you don't get discussed the first time, where you get a score that's not in the fundable range. It's okay. This happens to everybody, especially the senior folks. They I'm putting it in again. And persistence is the name of the game. You've got to put it in at least 4 times. 1 round of 2 where you submit, then you revise and resubmit. If you don't get a fundable score, then you do it at least 2 more times. You got to give it a minimum of 4 times. That's just a given. Now, I've had folks go, in fact, right now we're hoping to fund someone, a senior researcher. We're hoping this is their 8th time. And, persistence. I'm just so pleased that this person continued on. So the last piece I want you to do is I hope you submit an application. I know your mentors here are going to make sure you do that. But we really want you to be especially proud of this application and really give it your best effort. And the next time it'll get better and better and better. But I'm really looking forward to seeing your application come through. And I hope you know we want you to succeed. Everyone here is invested in you doing well. We really want you to go forward and conduct great research and identify new implementation strategies, because the goal is to deliver evidence-based practices that make a difference in the lives of kids, adults, and individuals who have problems with mental health and mental illness. So we're looking forward to working with you, and I look forward to having you, to hearing your questions when we get together in a couple days. So thank you very much for listening, and take care.